Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for bearing with us for the technical difficulties there. I'm Dr. Miller. It's good to see you this evening. I'm with Anthony Hibbert.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. And we're here tonight to present to you with you our budget. And we are just going to allow the last person in here.
I'll get them.
Okay, thank you. Can I see a thumbs up if you can see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Try that again. Can you see the screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. So tonight, Mr. Herbert and I are presenting to you our Board of Education adopted budget. This budget was initially started back in late fall. It was a collaboration with school administrators, department chairs, directors of different programs, and our central office administrative team. We goes through several months of working through bringing in all the priorities across the schools, across the different departments, consolidate everything together. We then present it to the Board of Education in January. They deliberate, go through several meetings, both between the committees and full board meetings, and then finally gets approved late February. That's the stage where right now we'll talk about the timeline towards the end of the presentation. So at this point, we're going to walk you through what the budget is about, what the priorities are, and explain to you some of the major initiatives, and then open up to any questions that you might have. So I talked about the budget process very quickly, but there's some overarching priorities that really are used to form the budget itself. First is we use what's called a zero-based budgeting. What that means is we don't take last year's budget and make it this year's budget. We go through a fine process. Anthony, if you could just make sure that anybody that logs in is admitted. Perfect, thank you. So we take a look at building the budget from $0 up. That means that everything that goes into the budget has to be fully justified. There has to be a request for that item to go into the budget. There is a lot of detail, quotes are obtained, projects are put together, and dollars for salaries, for benefits, everything is lined up from $0 on up based on the requests that are there. Second is that we've tried to do everything around student learning. That means that as we built the budget, we looked at everything that could go that are non-priorities in order to save the resources to what matters the most: student resources, teachers, staff that work with students, and instructional resources with students. That became the priorities of the budget. Third is the achievement gap. We clearly have students that are still struggling, both through the pandemic, students that might have 504, might be English language learners that are in special education, and we have to close the achievement gap. So we want to preserve the priorities associated with the staffing that's needed to support those students. And the fourth is anytime we look to add something to the budget, we ask the question, how can we fund it through either efficiencies or reductions? So what can we do to make our operations more efficient? What can we do to streamline our services, or the way that we conduct our operations? And where would we be able to reduce something in order to add something to the budget? So if we're going to add something, we've got to pay for it at the same time.
Okay. Usually the thing that most people are interested in is, what is the requested number? What's the increase from last year, and what is the percentage increase? So we are currently at a $33,103,090 request for next year, which is an increase of the current budget of just under $1 million, $955,000, which equates to a 2.97% increase. Talking to the business managers around the state, we are at this number, 2.97, roughly 0.2% above what the average is right now that boards of eds are approving. That number changes, of course, as more data comes in, but that's where we are currently. And if you look on the left-hand side of this slide, we break down the total budget into basically three categories. You have our certified staff, which are our teachers, our administrators, superintendents, OT, PT, speech and language. You have our non-certified staff salaries, which are our paraprofessionals, our ASOs, our custodians, secretaries, clerks. And then we have our operational budget, which includes the benefits and whatnot. So when you put that all together, you get the 33 million request. And I'm going to break this down for you over the next several slides so you can see where this comes from. So on this slide, you see that the vast majority of our budget goes to our certified staff salaries, and that's very common. That's just the way it is across Connecticut and across the country. You have our administrative salaries, you have our non-certified and our employee benefits. So basically 77% of our budget is salaries and benefits, which you'll see later. And then the operational side, some of our largest elements are transportation, repairs for and maintenance of our schools, tuitions for out of school or out placements for special education, our energy, and everything else. And I'll break that down later as well, so you get a sense for what quote unquote everything else is. This slide just shows you again, salaries and benefits, 77% of our budget, and the operation is the 23%. And we really have tried the best we could to keep this budget to not only meet our needs, but to make it as lean as we possibly could by looking at that operational side, that 23%, and trying to maintain our certified staff and non-certified staff the best we could. And you'll see that as we go through the slides. But again, very common for any school district to be human-centered, and therefore that's where most of your money goes. So as far as that all else, that operational side, transportation, repairs, special education, et cetera, that's our 23%, 7.7 million. And if you go to the next slide, the percentages of our request. So again, transportation is a big chunk. We'll go over that. It's 5% of our budget. Special education tuitions, repair and maintenance, and then everything else is going to be our supplies. So I'll break down each one of these pie slices for you in the next slide. So for example, our energy and electricity, this is a very confusing part of our budget because the numbers are very much volatile. You have the Russian invasion into Ukraine. It's going to impact the prices of oil. You have a variety of other issues that were impacting oil. So we actually budgeted for a 20% increase on our oil for next year. That may be even higher, and we just don't know at this point. But we do heat Quaker Farms, Oxford High School, and our central office using oil. The middle school is heated by propane, and Great Oak Elementary is still heated by electric, and that might be our cheapest energy bill next year. We'll have to wait and see, which is usually not the case. So that's our energy and electricity. Repairs, we have roughly in our budget $40,000 set aside for all of our custodial supplies that we've kept them well supplied over the last couple of years, so that was actually a leaner portion. Our contracts for maintaining the buildings is almost $250,000. The grounds, 100,000 or so. Repair and maintenance, each building has a certain amount of money we estimate that it'll cost to maintain the buildings. The middle school is obviously the newest, and therefore it has the least amount of money that goes into the maintenance as everything is new and working. So that's about almost 600,000 that goes to just upkeep of our buildings. Special education costs over $1 million. These are for placements for students who, for whatever reason, we're not able to meet the needs of the students within our school system. We always try the best we can to do that, but there are special situations where we have to send students out of our district to be educated, and that covers this piece. You can go to the next slide for you, Rob. In our transportation, this is all our busing and all the fuel for our busing, and that is an estimate. We're going to go out to bid on those contracts over the next several months, but in general, this is where we think we're going to land on transportation. And then the next slide goes over of everything else. What does that entail? Well, that's the materials to instruct the kids, the supplies for the classrooms, any type of services that the schools or the students may need. All of our products, contracts for operating our copiers, et cetera, the technology and security all go into that. So this is all the operational side of what it takes to actually run each of our 4 schools, central office, and some of our other programs. So together, that's about 24% or so, 23% of the overall budget operations. You can go to the next slide. I believe it's going to hand it back over to you, Rob.
Okay, thank you very much. So when you look at our budget, there's traditional rolling over expenses from year to year, and there's what's considered budget enhancements. What are the things that we're adding to the budget or changing the budget that changes how we do business or changes how we provide instruction or services to our students? There are 3 main areas that we're going to talk about here. The first being special education, and we're adding a teacher to develop a reading program and an ABA program. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Second is the department chair model. We're changing how the instructional leadership model works at the high school, and that will overflow to the middle school as well. And the third area is supplies. We're going to change how we order our instructional supplies and office supplies to make our entire system more efficient for both this year and years moving forward. So the first area is special education. And one of the things that we've noticed over the last couple of years is the amount of students that require structured literacy support. These are students that require real formalized instruction to close the achievement gap with their reading abilities. And the program that our students have access to is called structured literacy. We don't have enough reading teachers in the district to support the number of hours that our students need based upon their IEPs, their legally mandated program of instruction that they need to have. So right now, when we cannot fulfill that with our existing teachers, we backfill that with consulting from outside instructors. We believe that by hiring a reading teacher to be stationed at the middle school, that will allow us to have a full-time reading teacher at Quaker Farm School, Great Oak Elementary School, and the middle school. They'll provide full-time instruction in instructional literacy to students in all 3 schools, which will allow us to give better support to our students in each of those 3 schools, lower the amount of consulting that we need district-wide for reading instruction, and allows us to then reallocate an existing middle school teacher to develop a new ABA program at the middle school. That would be designed for students that are autistic or on the spectrum. And that allows us to both now, but really for the long term, try and preserve sending students out, what's called an outplacement, which requires significant costs from a tuition standpoint and a transportation standpoint. So some of this is to meet this year's needs, and some of this is setting us up for the long term of eventually saving costs of reducing demand on outplacement expenses itself. The second enhancement that we were speaking about is the department chair model. Right now, the department chairs serve in grades 9 through 12, and that's strictly at the high school. They're designed to provide instructional leadership, department leadership, and evaluations. And what we want to make the change to is to really focus those department chairs as curriculum leaders, take away the evaluation piece and really focus on curriculum leadership, as well as not just at the high school level, but creating some form of a structure that ties the middle school and the high school together to create vertical articulation, cohesion, alignment with the programs that we have, so that there is a well-articulated curriculum that's feeding from grades 6th grade all the way up through 12th grade. So there's not a disconnect between what the students are doing in the middle school to what the students are doing in the high school. There's a continuous and scaffolding set of experiences and curriculum that students have access to. And the third element of this, I'm going to get into this in a slide in a moment, is to reduce what is called differentials. And that exists when a teacher picks up an additional class that's beyond what their contractual obligation is from a contract standpoint. So right now we're still tweaking the department chair model, but essentially we've got 9 department chairs. And the idea is to condense this into some form of 3 or 4 department chairs that allows us to focus on consolidating, bring the departments that are most alike together to provide more of an interdisciplinary approach within the school, create more articulation between those departments that really are alike, and then create that structure and collaboration, cohesion with the middle school. The department chairs right now do evaluations, and one of the ideas of changing this model is to allow administrators to focus on evaluations and department chairs to focus on curriculum leadership. In many ways, the way that I view this is that department chairs are teachers, and right now they are evaluating teachers or staff that are also in their same bargaining unit, their same association. So we want administrators that are not part of the Teachers Association to evaluate teachers and have teachers not evaluate each other. When we take a look at that, one of the questions that comes to mind is, are we adding too many evaluations to the high school administrators? The answer to that is no. We need to take a look at this slide. On the right-hand side, you'll see that for Quaker Farms, the principal currently evaluates 24 teachers. Great Oak Elementary School, 23, middle school, 18. And the second administrator at the middle school, 17. Versus at the high school, right now there are close to 40 teachers that would need to be evaluated by an administrator. That equates to 20 per admin. That, if you take a look at the rest of the schools, is really on par with what we'd expect an administrator to evaluate in one of the other schools. So we spoke about the differential for a traditional teacher that teaches 5 classes based on their contract at the high school. If they pick up a 6th class, we pay them what's called a differential. Department chairs teach 3 classes based upon the contract. So if we add in they teach 4 classes. If they add in a 5th class to their schedule, we pay that differential. This school year alone, we've paid equivalent of $56,185 in differentials. So that's $6,000 based on the contract for teachers to take that additional class. We believe by that, putting the department chairs back in the classroom, it serves multiple purposes. Not only does it get the teachers changes the leadership structure, but it takes some of the most highly qualified teachers that are department chairs and puts them back in the classrooms. Those that are currently department chairs that become traditional teachers, they add back into their schedule the traditional class, and we take away the need to pay them a differential from a scheduling perspective. That differential exists when we cannot fit students in from a master schedule standpoint into all the classes they offer, and we have to then add an additional class to meet students' needs. We believe that by adding these teachers back into the rotation, we lower the need for the differentials across the board, in essence, then saving over $55,000 across the budget. The third area of enhancement is ordering instructional supplies and office supplies. Right now, you'll see in each school, in each department, you'll have secretaries or administrators that are responsible for collecting the requests for orders, getting quotes, entering those quotes into our financial system. The quotes get converted into purchase orders, equipment or instructional supplies, office supplies, they arrive, and then they sit in schools, and oftentimes you'll have the same orders taking place in all 4 schools. So what that means is we're not necessarily getting the best bulk ordering because you're having duplicate orders at a much lower quantity. So you can't take advantage of bulk ordering. At the same time, you might have 3 secretaries in 3 schools getting the same quotes, processing the same quotes, and us then creating purchase orders and paying invoices and checks for the same stuff. Well, that's redundant processes taking place across the system. And oftentimes you'll find supplies sitting in one school that's not being used at that moment or won't be used for a period of time that another school needs or wants. And that other school will place the order. Well, that stuff is sitting in other buildings. So if we can consolidate the orders into one central location, allows us to do better bulk purchases, reduce redundant processing within the schools, and eliminate having redundancy sitting in schools at the same time. We also believe that this system, we can tap into our 18 to 21-year-old program, which is our community activations program. Our students that are available, they need real work experiences, and right now they go out to the community. They work at various locations in Oxford. We can actually use them to help manage this and this process. So they help the district as well as developing real-time, real management, inventory management, delivery skills that's authentic. So we think it's a win-win for both the students and for the district. I'm gonna toss it back to you for 2 slides.
Great. So this page here is going to talk about some of our increases that we don't have any control over. The first element is the medical and our dental for our schools. We're part of the Connecticut Partnership Plan, which is allows us to get our insurance through the state of Connecticut. Because there's a large number of people in that plan, it tends to buffer us from large swings in the market. This year, it was the highest increase in the history of any of these plans at 8%. Most of my colleagues in the other districts were going kind of bonkers when we got these numbers because the comptroller for the state had told us it was going to come in lower. So this is an 8% increase. It would have been much higher if we had a smaller plan from that we used to have before we moved to this. So that's an 8% increase. And then the other large increase out of our control is for our non-certified staff members, their pension. The paraprofessionals and the variety of folks that are non-certified are a part of the Connecticut Municipal Employees Retirement System, which is called CMERS. And that went up from 14% to 16%. So that 14,000 is a result of that 2% increase. We didn't add more staff and therefore that went up. That's just the current staff that we had led to that increase. So overall, we have over $600,000 increase just on the benefits for our staff that are outside of our control. And the next page, and this was a question that came in the Zoom chat. What are you doing like as far as eliminating positions, 5th grade particularly? We had, as Rob had said earlier, we meet with each of the department heads and also the principals and talk about what are your staffing needs for next year. And one of the needs that became very clear to us was the need for another special education reading teacher. We currently have 2 in the district that's split amongst our schools. And so by adding a third, we put the third one at the middle school and allow the 2 that we currently have to work permanently, one at Quaker Farms and one at Great Oak Elementary School for the support of the reading that we've seen become an issue. To do this, that's going to be about an $81,000 addition to our staffing. That's salary and benefits. And so we need to offset that. So we were going through and talking to some of our staff members and we were told, well, we have 2 assistants for speech and language. We really only need 1. So, we said, we'll take that. We looked at the number of recess monitors we had at the elementary schools. We have 3 at Quaker Farms. We had 5 over at Great Oak. We'll say, we'll go to 4 at Great Oak for that. And then we looked at the teacher position and said, well, based on the numbers of students we have going into the 5th grade, that would be a reasonable place to make a reduction. So they basically do offset what comes with the $900 that we're adding to the budget to add this extra reading special education teacher at the expense of these other positions on the left. So that was the rationale for doing that.
Right, and there's a question in the chat about the 5th grade, and we actually have a slide in here about that. So this should answer your question. The enrollment is predicted every year. We use a company called NASDAQ. They take a look at our October 1 data. They take a look at a number of factors in our community and give us an enrollment projection for the following year. This is traditionally done late fall, beginning of the winter. This data is then used to help us forecast what we expect class sizes to be the following year. They are predicting that from the 4th grade to 5th grade next year, there's a reduction of 15 students from this current 5th grade class to next year's 5th grade class. So based upon that number, we decided to eliminate 1 5th grade teacher for next year, which takes the class size of 21.7 for this current school year to 23 next year. You'll see that our class sizes for next year, kindergarten, currently this year is 140 students with 7 teachers. That drops to 104 students for next year. So we're moving one of the kindergarten teachers to first grade to go along with that bubble for next year, and that will be a wave that will continue for a short period of time as the students migrate year to year. And the same is the reverse in fifth grade as we drop the enrollment by 15 students. So there was a reduction. That is typical when you're going through the budget process, is to take a look at the elementary school enrollment to see what the class sizes would be for next year to keep everything within the expected range.
While we're talking about staff, Rob, there was a question from the chat that was asked earlier, and I told her, the parent, I would answer that, which was based on our support services, which I had mentioned earlier. Is there any plans to include support for the libraries at the middle and the high school? And there was a plan that the middle school principal had started to work on, which would develop that. And when we were looking at this and the numbers for our overall budget, the question was, should we be adding more staff members to this budget during this time period where we have some uncertainty with inflation and the economy, on trying to present a number that would be palatable for the Board of Finance and the town, but also, as we look at what are our needs. And so we thought that it would make more sense to take more time to plan that process for the middle school, and including library services there, and perhaps the high school moving forward. But we thought that we'd leave it out of this particular year's budget request process. So I just wanted to answer that question that was in the chat.
Thank you. Anytime we put a budget together, there's inherent risk. And it's a question of risk tolerance. What do I mean by that? Is that we make certain assumptions in the budget. Anthony referred to the price of oil earlier. We put a ballpark figure based on what we expect the cost of oil to be. Same thing with the cost for insurance. We have an early estimate for the insurance brokers as what to expect, but that could end up changing for next year. And so there are three main areas that we look at for budget risk when we're building the budget. The first is enrollment. So we spoke about the enrollment forecast we get from our company that we use for enrollment projections. If they are off, then that's a risk. So this current school year, there actually was a expectation that the kindergarten enrollment would be much lower than it was. That enrollment spiked in the summertime, and we needed to add a kindergarten teacher during the summer. That's a risk to the budget. Same thing with special education. We could end up having 4 students move in August that have an IEP coming in the door that require a one-on-one paraprofessional, or a student that requires an outplacement based upon a prior district. Well, those would be expenses that we don't currently have allocated in the budget. That would be a large reallocation of resources to make happen within the existing budget. Second is substitutes. Right now, we've seen through COVID last year and this year, we don't have substitute teachers, substitute pairs, substitute secretaries or custodians that are knocking the door ready to work. We typically have more vacancies than we have substitutes filling those. So we took a substantial reduction in those substitute accounts, assuming that we will not be able to meet the needs of filling those vacancies again for next year. So that's a risk. We could have more subs that knock on the door and say, okay, we're ready to sub again next year. And we've lowered that account to pay for that. And then we've got traditional expenses. We could have repair costs that are unexpected. The high school has seen significant repairs over the last 2 years that you wouldn't expect to have at this point, the age of the building. Great Oak Elementary School, we're still in need of renovations, and there's every single classroom in that building and every single classroom at Quaker Farmers has heating units that, if they fail, cannot be replaced or repaired. They have to be replaced. Tuition, right now we're seeing from a special education perspective, tuition forecasted by the schools that we send our students to. They're projecting anywhere from a 5 to 10%, 12% increase, but those are projections that are not hard numbers yet. And then increased insurance. Right now we have an estimate from our medical insurance. We have an estimate from our insurance for property and for liability. But all those are early estimates. We don't know exactly if those are too low. In the case for medical insurance, we initially projected lower than it was, and it came back higher. We had to add to the budget during the process. That was unexpected. So where do we stand with the budget? We believe that we have put together a fiscally responsible budget, a budget that was grounded in zero-based budgeting, a budget that was developed from the ground up, really justifying the resources and the staffing that we put into the budget at a 2.9% budget. That is a very good sound percent to go into as we present it to the Board of Finance. When you take a look at the numbers Anthony referred to across the state, we're right in line of where a lot of school districts are at. And we believe it was put together in a very fiscally sound way. The challenge is that over the last 2 years, and including this year, so 3 budget cycles now, we've taken all the outside, all the periphery elements around the budget that we can do, from efficiencies of not only staffing, but service contracts that we have, resources that we purchase, how we conduct business. You took a look at the supplies this year. So at this point, we have cut away around all these things that we think are efficiencies that allows us to drive down the budget. It brought us down to that 2.97% initially out of the gate. That if we were needing to cut more from the budget and go below the 2.97% increase, and we're unable to find additional things from a resource standpoint, from an operational standpoint to cut, that we would have to start looking at staff. That's the last resort. But if we needed to get staff, an increase of anywhere from $60,000 to $80,000 is equivalent to either 1 teacher or 1 paraprofessional. And the challenge with that is if we needed to cut out a paraprofessional, those paraprofessionals are tied towards students based upon their legally mandated program, their special education IEP. So it's difficult to provide to take away legally mandated service. And if you start to take away teachers, now you're talking about increasing class size. And that's a challenge. And if you take away 2, 3, 4 teachers from K through 12, now you're looking at increasing class size beyond what we would typically do. So moving forward, as you go through the budget process, that's just something to keep in mind as what the impact would be if we would needed to take further reductions along the way. So where are we in the budget process tonight? We're sharing with the community, with parents, with staff, the budget, answering questions about that. On Thursday evening, we are presenting to the Board of Finance. The public is welcome to attend. It is at Town Hall at 6 p.m. And then the Board of Finance will begin to deliberate in their sessions between now and the end of April. And then we'll go to public referendum in the beginning of May. So as we go through this process, as we get information from the Board of Finance, as we know when meetings are taking place and discussions are about the budget, we'll keep our public informed as to what those deliberations are and if there's any reductions that are being asked or questions of us. So at this point, I'd like to open up to questions that you might have either through Zoom chat or if we have a hand raised.
I can go over a couple of things I was answering in Zoom chat. One was related to how we cover for teachers who are out if we don't have subs, and it was explained to everybody. And then I think it ended up being in more of a one-to-one conversation by mistake. But that's what I wanted everyone to understand, that what we do is we put it out to the staff members at each school. Listen, if we need coverage for X, Y, and Z, if your prep is during that period and you're willing to do that, then we will compensate you for that. And so it comes out of the same line items as substitute teachers would, but it ends up not overall costing the same amount. Sometimes we have to reshuffle some staff members to make that happen, but the staff has been very good with that. And then another question was, does that impact the teachers? Does that impact their interaction with people? Does it burn them out? I think basically, and I think the answer is it's not helpful for the teachers. I think that they would prefer to be able to have their prep time. They've gone through a lot over the last couple of years, but they do step up and help. So if we could get back to a time when people are willing to come into the buildings and sub, that would be helpful for our staff. I want to point out that it's not an Oxford issue, and it's not a Connecticut issue. It's a national issue. And it's not like, geez, if you bump the pay up $20 or $30 more a day, would you get more people? I'd love to do that and get more people. I can't get anybody in the buildings to take these positions. So that's where we're kind of stuck right now with that.
The Zoom session is set to allow you to unmute yourself. So if there is a question from the audience, feel free to either type it in the Zoom chat or to just unmute yourself and we could answer your questions.
Here's a,
Right.
there might be a camera shy, but if anyone does have a question or they think of something after this meeting is over, they can certainly email myself or Dr. Miller. See if
So one of the
something popped up.
questions was, we just had a question, will the middle school reading teacher be OG certified?
I believe that's the point of doing this, and that's I know there's some differences of what certification levels are within O&G, and I'm not the expert on that, but that's the point of the salary. I think where I had budgeted for it was that we'd have to pay for somebody who had some levels of expertise that would be in the mid to later parts of their career. So
Yes.
these people are going to be certified specifically related to special education, reading, and knowledge and skills in O&G. OG, where I'm going here. Which is what the other two reading specialists have.
So it's a highly specialized.
And that's why
Education.
it's not a one-to-one like replacement. We had to layer some things to try to offset that addition. Not seeing any others at the moment, Dr. Miller.
I'm not. You feel free to email either one of us or to post a question on our Facebook wall. We'll get the question answered for you. So I want to thank you for your time this evening. Please share with your friends and colleagues that this is available. So they're welcome to watch. It has been recorded. So thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate your time.